1993, Dr. David Lewis finished his hospital shift, said goodnight to his colleagues, walked through the exit doors into the cold evening air, and completely ceased to exist. But the part that will stay with you isn't that he vanished. It is who turned up living an entirely different life years later and how completely he had buried the man he used to be. So David was a physician, respected, established, the kind of doctor who knew his patients by name, who colleagues trusted without question, who had built a real, visible, functioning life for himself inside the walls of that hospital. Nothing that day was obviously wrong. No breakdown witnessed by anyone, no argument, no distress. He just finished his shift like it was any other ordinary day and walked out. And then the silence started. He didn't go home. He didn't call anyone. The people who knew him best sat waiting and then got worried and then went looking and found nothing. No clear trail, no explanation left behind, just the absence of a man who had been completely present and accounted for just hours before. Missing persons case was opened. Colleagues were questioned and the investigation moved forward and then slowed and then basically stopped because Dr. David Lewis had simply and totally disappeared. And then years later, a man surfaces, living quietly somewhere nobody had thought to look, under a name that wasn't his inside a life that had been built from scratch with extraordinary care. New identity, new routine, new everything. And when the connection was finally made, when someone looked at this quietly living man and said, "We know who you actually are," the explanation that came for why a respected physician walked away from his entire existence in the middle of a hospital shift and buried himself so completely for so long. It was not the answer anyone expected, because what David Lewis understood better than almost anyone is that in the right circumstances, a person can simply choose to stop being who they are. And if they're careful enough and patient enough and willing enough to let everyone who ever loved them spend years wondering, they can actually pull it off. Subscribe right now, because I've got dozens more stories just like David's, and some of them have endings far darker than this one.